All right, well, everyone's here, so we might kick off now. So again, welcome everyone to the session today. I can see a couple of you have worked out how to use the chat. So this session today will hopefully provide some useful information for you about the ACEN research grants for this year and answer any questions that you have. I'm joined today by Francesca Trady, who is the ACEN president, as well as Sonia Ferns, who will be monitoring the chat, who's been involved in the research committee for many years now. And yeah, so we're hosting this session for you today. Basically, the aim of the session is to provide consistent information, and we'll record the session to make it available on the ACEN website after, as well as the PowerPoint slides. As a general rule, we don't provide feedback on specific applications. Rather, we can provide general information on the grants, but we need to make sure it's equitable for everyone. So I can see a few of you have posted hello in the chat. We've gone through Zoom functionality, so I might just hand over firstly, before I get started, to Francesca to say a couple of words about the research grants.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we are all meeting today to talk about research grant at ACEN, and I pay my respect to the elders, both past, present, and emerging, and the ones amongst us here in this meeting. And I welcome you all. And I think it's great that there are so many participants here who are interested in doing research in the will space. Research in will is so important because we do need to always better understand practices, understandings, and insights, so we can really enhance the credibility and the authenticity, and actually also the quality assurance of will experiences. It is very seductive to go forth practical solutions, especially now in COVID times, but we also should always consider, hey, what do we already know about this? Where are the gaps? What do we don't clearly understand? And I look at you to advance us in the research, scholarship, and research space. And I think it's great to have you here, and I hope you ask a lot of questions, and I look forward to a really good dialogue. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Francesca. And I forgot to introduce myself earlier. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anna Rowe, and I'm the chair of the Research and Impact Committee. So essentially the purpose of the research grant scheme is to build capacity for ACEN members who are interested in undertaking research, whether they're experienced researchers, but in particular, we are interested in promoting the work of early career researchers as well. The committee, the Research and Impact Committee, is also interested to promote and support scholarship in will, and also develop effective mechanisms for dissemination and embedding research-based practice in will programs, and also to promote collaboration among will researchers. One of the things, and I may say this a couple of times in the session, we're really interested in supporting the value add and impact to the broader will community. So we're particularly interested in research programs, research studies that are not, the impact is not necessarily just local to that particular university, but rather for the wider will community. And as I'm sure you're all aware, there has been quite a lot of reduction to funding in learning and teaching over the last few years. So these grants are really quite a valuable opportunity to get your research started. So we have currently 2 schemes. We have up to 3 grants that we offer, which is a full research grant of $10,000 each. And there's 2 smaller grants of $5,000, which are for emerging or early career researchers. Now, when you apply for your grant, you'll need to indicate which one of these 2 schemes you are putting in for. Now, both these grants are open for academic and professional staff. However, the ECR grant, which is the $5,000 grant, must be led by either an emerging or early career researcher, which we define as someone at the early stage of their academic career and either needs to be working towards or having been awarded a PhD within 5 years. So this second grant initiative actually came out of the last conference, where some of the early career researchers and PhD students were telling us that they were finding it hard to compete against more established researchers. And so we wanted to be able to support people in the earlier stages of their careers. These are the list of the themes for 2020. As you can see, there's quite a number of them, and we have intentionally kept them open so that people can consider which aspect they want to research. Essentially, we're looking for areas where there are opportunities and also where there's gaps in existing research. Now, these themes were identified through the National Will Strategy, also previous research symposiums and the conference, various webinar series that ACEN has hosted, and also the research priority areas for the World Association for Cooperative Education. Now you'll see here down the bottom, there's a note, and this is something that's emerged from the current situation. And essentially, we're really keen actually to we're really keen to receive applications that make reference to and/or focus on strategies relevant to COVID-19. This is something that we will highly regard. Now, applications can fit into any of these themes. There might be some of these themes more than others that relate more, more relevant to COVID-19, but it is something that we are particularly interested in. So you may have received an email from ACEN last week about this. So in terms of eligibility and reporting requirements, in terms of eligibility, the main thing is your university needs to be registered as an ACEN member, or you yourself need to be registered as an ACEN member. So in terms of being able to apply for these awards, you need to check the ACEN website if you're not sure if your institution is an institutional member of ACEN. So please check that website if you're not sure, because only institutions that are members of ACEN, the staff are eligible to apply for these awards. In terms of reporting requirements, projects need to be completed within 12 months, and we are generally very strict about this. Timelines are non-negotiable. And I'll talk a little bit more about, given the current circumstances, how you may want to take that into consideration with your research design a little bit later on. Now, funding is paid at the commencement of the project, and that date can vary depending on how long it takes to invoice your institution to ACEN. But usually it sort of tends to occur around about probably anywhere from August to October as a general rule. There are a number of requirements that you'll need to meet if you are successful. For example, you will be required to submit an interim and final project report, and that final report will be published on the ACEN website. And you'll also need to submit a statutory declaration detailing how the grant funds were spent. As I mentioned before, grants are available to professional or academic staff with full institutional membership. Grants are not available to members of the ACEN board. And we do particularly encourage applications that include industry or community organisation partners. I might just open it up briefly to see if there's any questions at this stage around either the grant schemes or eligibility or reporting requirements. Sonia, how are we going there?
I've got 2 questions that you might want to answer then Anna.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is if a team of researchers if it is a team of researchers, do all researchers need to be members of ACEN?
My understanding is it's only the project lead.
And I would agree with that, yeah. So the money and funds, etc., can only sit with a university that is a member. But if you're drawing in, for example, we would encourage industry partners, and they're not all members of ACEN. So.
Exactly. Yes, I would agree with that. It's really just the project lead or leads.
And the next question is, when would you expect the successful project to start?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, before you answer, Anna, Michelle's just asked if she could see the slides with the themes again, please, while you answer that question.
Sure.
Thank you.
No worries. Thanks. So the project, as I mentioned, this exact starting date will depend on when you get the funds. So that's basically the date from which we consider you start. And that will depend somewhat on how long it takes for your institution to invoice ACEN and that process to occur. And I know it can get held up sometimes. Typically, we will advise the successful grants around mid-July as a typical kind of time frame, but as I said, it can take a couple of months until those processes work their way through. So I would say October at the latest, but hopefully you would be able to get the money by at least August or September.
And that's it for now, Anna.
All right, thanks, Sonia. We'll keep going then. Okay, so I'm just going to work through now the application requirements and also talk a bit about what sorts of things the review panel will be looking for in a strong application. So as I mentioned before, firstly, you will need to indicate whether you're applying for a full research grant or the emergent early career research grant. Now, I should also mention we don't have a specific template for this. However, all these application requirements are on the website, so you can easily set out your own template based on these different categories, and you will be expected to address all of them. So this is actually a useful way of structuring your application. I should also mention that the maximum number of pages for an application is 5. Now, we do allow the reference list to be additional to that. However, if your application is not within 5 pages, then it will not be considered. So it's really important for you to fit all these application requirements within the 5 pages. And this is really a workload issue for the review panel because we do read a lot of these and we need to keep it manageable for ourselves. So yeah, so I'll just mention that because it is very important. Obviously, also you need to have the title of your project and which theme or themes you're going to be addressing. Now, you can address one or multiple themes. It doesn't really make any difference, but it's just important to identify what they are. Also, to provide a brief description of the project of around 50 words and the details and a bio for the project lead or leads. So this may be more than one person. It's also really important to note that research grants led by an emerging or early career researcher must nominate a senior mentor who will provide guidance on the project. So please add those details if you are applying for that particular grant. It's also important to list the names of any other people, institutions and organisations if this is applicable, including any early career researchers or industry community partners. And as I mentioned before, both of these are encouraged. Next, it's important to indicate how the project is consistent with the vision, mission and aims of ACEN, and also how it will build on existing research and scholarship in work integrated learning.
Sorry, Anna, just to interrupt because I'm not too sure. Avril, is the word limit for the project leads 100 for each researcher? Is that relating to the biography?
Yes, but we only need biographies for the project lead. We don't need them for everyone else that's involved in the project. And yes, it is 100 words max for that person or persons.
Thank you.
So just on continuing on point 7, we know that, WIL has been the focus of quite a lot of scholarship and research in the past. For example, previous Office of Learning and Teaching projects, previously funded ACEN projects, various conferences, journals, for example, the International Journal of Work Integrated Learning and so forth. It's really important that you refer to this scholarship in your application and clearly state how your research intends to extend or build on this. That is really, really important and sometimes an area where some people fall down, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. If your theme relates to a broader area where you may need to pull in some research and scholarship from outside of WIL, that is also fine. Please make reference to that broader literature. It's also really important that you include a reference list. And as I said, that can fall outside the 5 pages, but you really do need to include it in your application. In terms of the aims of the project, it's very important that these are clear and explicit and I guess they provide the scope of the research for us. It's not absolutely essential that you provide research questions in your application. However, they do actually really help the review committee in understanding the scope of your project. So I would recommend including them where possible. In terms of expected outcomes, it's really important that you do clearly identify any outcomes from the project. For example, if you're intending to develop a website or resources or principles or anything like that, please state clearly what those outcomes are. It's also considered quite important to us that these outcomes are transferable to other contexts. So for example, if your research was in one particular discipline, we would like to know how the outcomes of the project could relate to other disciplines, professions, universities, sectors, and so on. So we're really interested in how your research will impact on the broader WIL community, and that the outcomes won't just be limited to a small number of people. So that's something that's really important. In terms of the research methodology, it's important to clearly state what the methodology is and how it relates to the research aims. So the design must align with your research aims and questions. Please include any relevant theory if that's applicable, and I guess expand on perhaps why you have chosen the approach you have. So for example, if you've chosen a qualitative or quantitative approach, please indicate why you have chosen those approaches. In terms of details, it's really important to be specific around details such as the sample size, data collection tools. So for example, if you're doing surveys or interviews, please write approximately how many participants you're intending to interview or survey or so forth. It's just really important to have those details because it's hard for us to make a judgment call if those details are not there. As I mentioned before, it's important that the project needs to be contained within 1 year. So in terms of designing your research methodology, please ensure that it will be doable in 1 year. Now, it's important to note that delays due to COVID-19 will not be permitted. So please ensure that there is contingency plans built into your research design in the event that social distancing does remain in place for some time. And we feel this is a really good opportunity for you to be a bit innovative, I guess, in your research methodologies. So that's a really important point. In terms of the impact of the project, I think I may have mentioned before, it's important, I mean, this is essentially where your research makes a difference. And so we're really interested to know what is the impact for your institution nationally, how it will impact on practice, policy, and so forth. So it's really important, this is an important section as well. As I said, we're really interested in projects that have that broader relevance or transferability to other contexts. And we're interested to know how the work will benefit the WIL community more broadly. Now, where applications do tend to fall down, there's a couple of different areas. The first would be where the aims or the scope are not particularly clear, including the reasons for doing the research. Another area is where the application hasn't built on existing literature and there is key literature that hasn't been referred to. So as I mentioned, it's really important to be quite thorough when you do your literature review to make sure that that key literature is covered. Some applications fall down when the methodology and associated methods are not particularly clear. For example, not putting in details such as the sample size or justifying why you've chosen a particular approach. And finally, some applications fall down when they haven't demonstrated the value of the research or the potential impact for the will community, or how it might be transferable to other areas. For example, if it seems that the impact is really only limited to one institution, then it's unlikely that that application will be viewed as favourably as others. So just a couple more areas. Dissemination plan. This is an opportunity for you to put in things like conferences that you may plan to attend, or webinars, journals. Again, be specific, say which journals, which conferences you're planning to disseminate the research. In terms of the overview of project phases and timeline, it's really important that this is detailed and that there's an alignment with the project outcomes. So you'll need to include the various stages from ethics approval through to recruitment of participants, if that's relevant to your project, data collection, analysis, writing up, dissemination. All that needs to be factored in and scheduled against the different months of the year, so we can see clearly and be confident that you can complete this project within 12 months. Projects can again fall down when this information is not clear. And also if projects seem overly ambitious and the committee doesn't feel confident that it can be completed within 1 year, that can also be an issue as well. Finally, if projects involve creating a website, it's important that this is made available to the wider will community, and a Creative Commons license may be applied if appropriate. Also, if you're planning to develop a website, it must be able to be maintained for up to 5 years. So that's also important. And in terms of the budget, I will talk about that very soon. Let's go through briefly the roles and responsibility of the project lead. Essentially, that person's responsible for arranging relevant ethics approval, and that the project be completed within timelines, that the budget be spent as per the original application. Also for ensuring the various reports are submitted, seeking opportunities to disseminate outcomes of the research. And also it's important to acknowledge ACEN in any publication, resource, report, etc. that result from the research. And again, all this information is available on the website, but we will just go through a few points around the budget. It's really important that all items are directly related to research aims. If they're not, that is a bit of an issue. So they really must, anything in the budget must support the research aims. And you can see here there's a list of allowable budget expenses. For example, if you need to recruit a research assistant to do some interviews for you, or a literature review, that is an allowable budget expense. And there's a number of other expenses there, such as postage, printing, photocopy. Travel for conferences is also permitted. However, just be mindful not to allocate too much of the budget towards it. A reasonable amount is okay, but if most of the budget, for example, was allocated to conference travel, I think we would have an issue with that. So just be mindful of that. Non-allowable budget expenses include salary for the applicant. However, this can be a form of in-kind support. And also indirect institutional expenses, overheads, permanent equipment and capital purchases are not permitted.
Anna, could I interrupt please for one moment?
Sure.
So Claire's asked an interesting question that I thought the whole group might like to perhaps have a think about. If a project already has ethics approval, yes, would that be funded? Now, in my view, that's not a flat out yes or no response. So I'll perhaps get you to initiate response and yeah. Yeah.
You're right, Sonia. That's not an automatic yes or no. We have had some projects in the past, I believe, that have had ethics approval, but it would come down to, again, the project and what value add it has for ACEN. For example, if it was a project that seemed to have limited impact for other institutions, then it would not be as favourable. However, if it met all the other criteria, I don't think that the fact that ethics had already been approved would be an issue in itself.
No, I agree. Yeah, so I think it's just had to be taken on its own merit. So if you've taken the initiative and started up a project and progressed with ethics approval that you were going to do with or without funding, that's fabulous, and it's related to all of the philosophies that are in line with ACEN's, and you get the funding, then I can see no reason why it wouldn't be funded should it be selected. Yep.
Definitely.
But if it's got other funding from somewhere else, another body or something, that's a whole, and you've got ethics, that's a whole new ball game. So
yeah, that's a bit more complicated. Yeah. All right, thank you for that. So also, each application needs to have a letter of endorsement from the project lead's line manager. And this endorsement indicates support for the project and willingness for the time of the project lead and or any other staff that are involved to be basically undertaken. Now, it's important to attach this letter of endorsement when you submit your application. So please don't send them in multiple emails. Please put them all in the one email and send it to us with your application. In terms of the selection process, it's a rigorous two-phase process. So essentially, when all the grants come in, the applications are read by a panel consisting of members of the Research and Impact Committee and possibly some other experienced researchers in the field. Now, initially, each application is read by 2 panel members, and then we all come together and discuss the merits of each application. And we basically shortlist a second round of applications, which are subsequently read by all members of the panel. And then we have a second meeting to discuss and decide which of those will be awarded grants. We have a rubric that we make our assessments on, which you can see up here on the screen. Once that second round of assessment is undertaken, then we recommend, we identify who we feel should be the recipients of the grants. This is sent to the ACEN National Board for approval, and once it goes to the board for approval, the applicants are then notified, which, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully will be around mid-July. Now, all grant applicants can receive some feedback on their application. This may not necessarily happen in mid-July. It can take a while to compile everything, but for us, it's really important that this is a developmental process and that everyone is provided an opportunity to get some feedback on their application. So I think I may have also mentioned that people on the ACEN board and also the Research and Impact Committee cannot provide you with specific feedback on your application because it needs to be an equitable process for everyone. So we really do encourage you to have someone read over your application before you submit it. Ideally, find a mentor, perhaps someone that's done some research in the past or been successful in securing grant funding. I mean, this process is fairly similar to other grant schemes. So yeah, we really encourage you to find a colleague or someone that can read it for you. And yep.
Sorry, Sonia again, I'm sorry, but I just said Leopold has put, and I'm not sure I understood the context, Leopold, so I thought I'd put it on the table. What happens if my line manager is also a co-investigator? I'm not sure there's any issue with that at all, but Leopold may have a particular reference point for that question.
Sorry, when I reread my question, I realized I should have put a bit more context in. It was about the letter of support from the line manager. And I was just wondering for whom where the letter should come from if my line manager is also part of the wider project team.
I would suggest your line manager's line manager, Leopold.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to come from anyone else, to be honest. Yeah, I think that would be satisfactory.
But if the line manager was actually on the project team, just for accountability and transparency, I would go to your line manager's line manager. Yeah, but we do trust people.
I mean, it's Franziska, just the idea of getting that letter is to give ACEN confidence that you have been allowed time to do this research.
Thanks, Francesca and Sonia. Okay, you can see here the members of our Research and Impact Committee. One thing I forgot to mention is that people on the committee do not review applications for their own institution, and we also do not review applications where another conflict of interest may be identified. For example, if we have worked particularly closely with someone in research or some other area. So just it's good to know that. So, and yeah, so that's all the information I have today. The application closing date is the 15th of May at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Please submit your applications to the ACEN admin email that's on the screen. There is the link to the website there which has further information. Please ensure that you do submit your application by the due date because there will be no extensions. And yeah, as I mentioned, this webinar has been recorded, so you can access it at a later date. And we will open up for questions.
I've got a couple in the chat, Anna, which I'll just highlight to you. So someone's asked, what is the census day for the 5-year milestone? Is this the deadline of application, May 2020, or is this January 2020? Thanks. I'm not sure. Is that about how you define the 5-year early career academic or early career researcher criteria? Because it's 5 years from the date that you graduated. So I'm not sure whether that's answering the question.
Yeah, it would normally be 5 years from the date that you've graduated in terms of the month.
Yeah.
That would be my understanding of it.
I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yuteo, I hope that answers your question. Oh, yes, it does. Thanks. Great. And one more from Avril. There's apparently, looks like if they're putting a grant that they're having 3 lead researchers, I guess, sort of equitably spread across the project. Is a letter of endorsement needed only for 1 lead researcher?
I would say if you're a project lead, it would need to be from all of them.
Yeah. I agree. So the lead researcher, the person taking the ultimate responsibility,
yes,
for the implementation, execution, findings, credibility, etc. of the project, they all need a letter of endorsement, I would have thought.
That's correct. Yes.
That's it at the moment in there. Yep.
Is there any other questions?
Just one quick question. What is the success rate that you have in your applications?
I think from memory from last year, it was around 10%, roughly. But I don't know about previous years. That's just from last year.
If perhaps I could make a quick comment there, Anna. We've increasingly getting more, I'm not sure who spoke then, but we are increasingly getting more applications over the years. So, you know, in years gone by, you would have had a higher percentage that were successful, but now we get more and more grants and high quality high quality proposals. There probably is closer to a 10%.
Yep.
By the way, I'm not really in Canada.
Any other questions? You're always welcome to email us via the ACEN email if you have any other questions. Yeah, I just saw the comment about the rubric. Yes, that is in the slides. Yes, we don't actually have the full rubric with the different levels available, but the criteria are in the slides.
I don't want to harp on it, but the question about the bio for the 3 researchers. So we're basically all lead researchers because we're coming at the same topic from different academic perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for us, it's quite important for you to have the bio of the 3 researchers. And whether, just to clarify, we can have 100 words for each 3, or we have to get everything into the 100 words for all 3 of us.
I think you could have 100 words for each one. The only thing is that may add considerably to the length of your application, and given that it needs to be 500 words, I'll try and keep them perhaps a bit shorter.
Yeah.
Would be my advice.
Yep. Thank you.
I agree. Yep.
All right then. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I hope that was informative for you all. And if you have any further questions, please contact us, and we will make these resources, the slides, and the